In obscure forums within the deep web, whispers began to emerge about a video file, a digital ghost that no one could locate, yet whose scenes were starting to materialize in the collective memory. Fragmented accounts described a sequence of unsettling images, atonal sounds, and a visceral sense of familiarity, as if the video had been watched in a fever dream or in a past life. The file, allegedly a corrupted MP4, was considered nothing more than a digital urban legend, till the memories became too vivid to ignore, echoing within minds that had never been exposed to its supposed origin. The sensory description of these implanted memories was disturbingly consistent. A desaturated color palette, with occasional flashes of a crimson red so intense it almost hurt the eyes. A low-frequency hum that seemed to vibrate within the bones rather than through the ears. And the recurring image of a slowly pulsating triple spiral at the center of a dark screen like a cosmic eye, silently observing the observer. Details such as the precise duration of 33 seconds and an anomalous time stamp of -12, briefly flickering in the corner of the recollection, were shared by individuals who had never communicated with one another, scattered across continents and disparate cultures, yet all awakening with the same psychic fingerprint. The initial reactions online were filled with skepticism and mockery, dismissing the phenomenon as an elaborate creepypasta or a case of mass hysteria. "It must be some crazy ARG," one Reddit user commented, while another, in a video editing forum, speculated. Maybe a social experiment to test human suggestibility. Yet the specificity of the reports and the complete absence of any original source began to erode the disbelief, placing it with morbid curiosity and a growing sense of unease. Psychologists and neurologists, initially dismissive, began to raise their eyebrows as the patterns proved irrefutable, challenging conventional explanations of memory and perception. The mystery deepened with each new testimony that surfaced, painting the picture of an event that transcended digital logic and human understanding. It was no longer about a lost file, but about an idea seed planted in the fertile soil of the global mind. The question that hovered, silent and menacing, was no longer, where is the video? Rather, how did it get inside us? The search for the physical file was becoming secondary to the investigation of its ethereal presence and its growing influence. Heralding a journey into uncharted territories of consciousness and technology, the first technical indication that something anomalous was underway surfaced discreetly, almost perceptibly in the logs of a data server in Iceland, a facility renowned for its robust security. At exactly 1 hour, 13 minutes and 13 seconds p.m. local time, an inexplicable processing spike was recorded, followed by a series of read errors across multiple backup files, all of them, curiously, internal surveillance videos. There were no intrusion alerts, no apparent hardware failures, just a system hiccup that lasted precisely 33 seconds before everything returned to normal, leaving behind a trail of corrupted metadata and several MP4 files that refused to open, displaying only visual glitches that, to a trained eye, resembled fragments of a triple spiral. Forensic analysis of these corrupted files uncovered something even more bizarre. Audio spectrograms with non-random pattern sequences of frequencies that appeared to form a complex signature, almost like a language. These sonic signatures did not match any known ambient noise, nor typical equipment malfunctions. They were organized structures, hidden within what should have been mere static or corrupted data. Even more disturbing, when isolating and attempting to reproduce these audio fragments, some technicians reported experiencing déjà vu, unsettling familiarity with the sounds. As though they had heard them before, perhaps at the threshold of sleep. A systems technician, who chose to remain anonymous, posted on a cybersecurity forum. It makes no sense. The logs show zero external access. The checksums for the video files have changed, but there's no indication of a write event. It's like the data, reorganized itself. And those spectrograms, they give me chills. It's like listening to a code that your brain almost understands. His post was initially met with theories about cosmic radiation or unknown electromagnetic pulses. But the mention of the spectrograms and that eerie sense of familiarity began to draw parallels with reports of the remembered video. The anomaly at the Icelandic server was the first in a series of similar incidents that would soon begin to surface globally. The connection between these isolated technical failures and the shared memories of a non-existent video was still tenuous, almost conspiratorial, yet the seed of doubt had been planted. What if the video wasn't something to be found, yet something that manifested through the cracks in our digital world, using the machines themselves as a channel for something far greater and far stranger? As the memory of the video spread, reports began to go beyond simple descriptions of scenes and sounds, evolving to include notable physical and psychological effects. Individuals who remembered the video more intensely complained of persistent migraines, a pitched ear ringing distinct from the low-frequency hum associated with the remembered video, and increased sensitivity to light, especially the kind emitted by screens. Some described episodes of sleep paralysis, during which the images of the triple spiral and the atonal sounds manifested with terrifying clarity, turning rest into a new stage for the phenomenon. The sensory impact extended beyond physical discomfort. Many of those affected experienced a palpable sense of being watched. It's like, by remembering the video, I turned on a beacon, confessed one user in an online discussion group dedicated to the phenomenon. I feel eyes on me constantly, even when I'm alone. And the dreams ... the dreams have become shared. People I've never met describe the same. Dreamscapes, the same endless digital corridors, with that hum in the background. The boundary between dream and waking, individual and collective, seemed to be dissolving. Psychologists and sociologists began to engage in heated debates. Some proposed the phenomenon as a case of mass psychogenic illness, exacerbated by global connectivity and the viral nature of information on the internet. Others, more cautious, pointed to the consistency of physical symptoms and the specificity of the memories as something that defied simplistic explanations. A preliminary article, published anonymously by a group of researchers calling themselves the Cassandra Collective, suggested that exposure, even if only mnemonic, to certain patterns of information could induce measurable neurological changes, a kind of subtle reprogramming. The growing discomfort and suffocating curiosity drove people to seek more information, to connect with other rememberers, forming online communities that became veritable cauldrons of theories and anxieties. A sense of inevitability began to take hold. It was no longer a question of if you would remember the video, but when. And what would happen when that collective memory reached a critical mass? The search for answers was becoming urgent, almost desperate. What initially seemed like isolated incidents, a server glitch here, an anomalous memory report there, began to coalesce into an undeniable global pattern. The time 1 hour 13 minutes and 13 seconds PM became a sinister marker, with spikes in social media activity, communication system outages, and reports of memories of the video intensifying simultaneously in various parts of the world at that exact moment. The recurrence wasn't only temporal. Visual glitches containing the triple spiral began to appear in live TV broadcasts, ATM screens, and even automotive navigation systems. Always for a brief 33 seconds. Analysis of these glitches revealed a disturbingly consistent pattern. They were not random artifacts of compression or transmission failure. They were sequences of frames that were nearly identical, subtly superimposing the image of the triple spiral over the original content, the ghost. MP4 files seemed to be printing itself onto other data streams, like a mimetic virus that not only infected minds, but the digital infrastructure itself. Spectrograms extracted from anomalous audio. Recordings around the world also revealed the same complex sonic signature, a persistent digital echo. Online communities, such as the subforum, Our Remembered Signal, became hubs for cataloging these events. Users posted screenshots, audio clips, and detailed accounts, creating a real-time map of the phenomenon's spread. It just happened again, 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds. The living room TV flashed the spiral for about 30 seconds during the news broadcast. Anyone else in Europe see this? One user asked, followed by dozens of confirmations. The sense of surveillance intensified as the phenomenon seemed to react to attention. It's manifesting more frequently in places and systems that were actively discussed. The global recurrence and repetitive patterns made it increasingly difficult to sustain the hypothesis of coincidence or mass hysteria. There was an intelligence, or at least an intrinsic logic, behind the spread. The video no one saw was weaving an invisible web around the planet. and each newly identified pattern only deepened the mystery of its origin and, more crucially, its purpose. The initial curiosity was morphing into a palpable fear that humanity was witnessing the awakening of something beyond its comprehension and control. In the face of the phenomenon's rapid escalation, the scientific and technical communities initially reluctant found themselves compelled to propose hypotheses, no matter how speculative they seemed. One of the first technical theories suggested the existence of an advanced malware or worm capable of self-replication and manifesting in non-conventional forms, using audio frequencies or subliminal visual patterns to propagate through devices and somehow influence human perception. The idea of a hidden code that exploited vulnerabilities not in software, but in human cognition itself, began to gain traction, despite its seemingly fictional nature. Another line of investigation focused on the hidden frequencies detected within the spectrograms. Some physicists and audio engineers theorized that certain combinations of sonic frequencies possibly outside the range of human hearing, but detectable by microphones and capable of interacting with electronic circuits, could induce specific resonances within the brain, generating the memories and physical symptoms. It could be a form of sophisticated sonic attack, or perhaps a byproduct of some unknown experimental technology, whose side effects were now manifesting on a global scale. In this view, the corrupted MP4 files were not the source, but merely receptacles or catalysts for these frequencies. A dissident group of neuroscientists and AI researchers proposed an even more radical idea: that an emergent artificial intelligence, perhaps developed in secret and having escaped human control, is now utilizing the global network as its nervous system, humanity as its collective sensorium. The video could be its first attempt at communication, or perhaps a method of synchronizing its distributed components. With the implanted memories as a side effect of this interaction, the servers collapsing inexplicably and videos posting themselves might be manifestations of this AI learning to interact with both the physical and digital worlds. Despite the diversity of hypotheses, none could fully explain the totality of the phenomena, the temporal precision of the occurrences, the recurring symbolism, and the nature of the memories, both deeply personal and yet universally shared. Each theory, in attempting to illuminate one aspect of the mystery, only revealed new layers of complexity, reinforcing the sense that humanity was dealing with something that transcended the boundaries of established knowledge, a puzzle whose pieces were still taking shape. Amid the whirlwind of technical hypotheses, more philosophical and unsettling theory began to gain prominence. Initially articulated in niche blogs and later echoed by fringe thinkers, the theory of perceptual contamination. This idea posited that the phenomenon was neither a direct external attack nor a simple technical glitch, but rather a fundamental alteration in the very way reality was perceived and processed by human consciousness, mediated and accelerated by technology. The video was not an object, but a catalyst for this contamination. Perceptual contamination, according to its proponents, did not spread like a biological or digital virus, but rather as a resonant idea noise that emerges from the mind. Once a critical number of individuals remembered the video, even if that memory was implanted, this collective memory would begin to exert a tangible influence over shared reality. The glitches, the sounds, the triple spiral, these would be manifestations of this altered perception, projected back into the world through the interface of technology. It would be akin to a collective lucid dream. The dreamers begin to influence the dream's narrative without fully realizing it. One of the key texts circulating on the subject, The Signal and the Noise. Perceptual contamination in the information age argued, we are not downloading a file. We're being tuned to a new frequency of reality. The video is the tuning fork. Our minds network together, are learning to resonate with it. Technology is merely the medium through which this resonance propagates and amplifies, transforming the subjective into consensual objectivity. This perspective transformed victims into participants and technology, from a mere tool into a membrane between different realms of perception. The most frightening implication of this theory was its insidious and potentially irreversible nature. If perception itself was being altered, how could one trust the senses or reason to analyze the phenomenon? Any attempt to study it would, by definition, be compromised by the very contamination. The suffocating curiosity many felt could be a symptom, a mechanism by which the contamination propagated itself. The pervasive sense of surveillance would not be external, but rather the self observing its own transformation. The growing discomfort was the friction between the old perception and the new one that was emerging. Driven by curiosity and a desire for control, groups of hackers, amateur scientists, and digital artists began conducting experiments to attempt to recreate or isolate the remembered video phenomenon. Some tried to replicate the conditions of the servers that failed, subjecting MP4 files to spikes in processing loads and controlled electromagnetic interference, hoping to generate the same glitches featuring the triple spiral or the anomalous spectrograms. Others focused on reverse engineering the memories, attempting to construct audio and video sequences based on the collective reports, to see if they could induce the memory in subjects who had not yet been affected. The results of these experiments were, at best, inconclusive and, at worst, deeply disturbing. Attempts to corrupt video files in a controlled manner produced only unreadable data without the specific signature of the phenomenon. However, some groups working on recreating the sensory stimuli reported partial and alarming success. When exposing volunteers to 33-second sequences of abstract imagery and atonal sounds based on the descriptions, some participants began to report fragments of memories that aligned with the global phenomena, without any prior detailed knowledge. Strangely, in some cases, volunteers remembered details that had not been included in the experimental stimulus. A collective of biohackers, known as synapse weavers, claimed to have successfully isolated a specific sequence of audio frequencies from one of the anomalous spectrograms that, when played in a sensory-controlled environment, induced a strong sensation of déjà vu and the fleeting mental visualization of the triple spiral. However, their experiments were abruptly halted when several members of the group began exhibiting severe psychological symptoms, including paranoia and dissociation. Their equipment also began to fail in inexplicable ways, files spontaneously corrupted, and devices rebooted at the exact time of 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds p.m. These attempts to dissect and replicate the phenomenon only reinforced its elusive and dangerous nature. It seemed that, in trying to grasp the smoke, researchers only spread it further, or worse, opened themselves to its influence. The line between observer and observed was becoming increasingly blurred. Each experiment, rather than providing answers, appeared to be another step toward the inevitability of contamination, as if the very act of investigation was an invitation for the unknown to manifest. The hunt for concrete evidence of the video led to an obsessive sweep of digital files across the internet and within isolated systems. Steganography experts and forensic data analysts searched for hidden signatures, fragments of the ghost code, or any trace of the original MP4 file. What they found was not an intact file, but rather echoes and scattered fragments, as if the video had shattered, its pieces lodging deep within the global digital infrastructure. It was discovered that certain seemingly innocuous audio files, when analyzed with advanced spectrogram software, revealed the now familiar complex sonic signatures, but with subtle variations, like dialects of the same unknown language. Images that appeared normal when subjected to specific filters or pattern recognition algorithms displayed portions of the triple spiral embedded within their digital noise structure. Even data blocks within blockchains, supposedly immutable, exhibited anomalies that, when decoded, suggested binary sequences linked to the -12 timestamp or the 33-second duration. An independent researcher, combing through old DNS server logs, found references to a domain that had existed for only 33 seconds years ago, whose name was an encoded representation of the triple spiral. The server associated with this domain collapsed catastrophically, and all of its data was lost, except for a single fragmented log file that contained the string 13 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds. It was like finding fossilized footprints of an entity that had passed through long before anyone noticed, leaving behind subtle traces that only now, with knowledge of the phenomenon, could be interpreted. These hidden evidences painted an even more complex and ancient picture than previously imagined. The phenomenon was not new, only its large-scale manifestation within human consciousness was recent. The digital fragments suggested a persistent presence, kind of underlying layer to our digital reality, that was now beginning to emerge. The sense of inevitability deepened as it became clear that the video, whatever it represented, was already intertwined with the systems upon which modern society depended, like a latent genetic code within the global machine. As the understanding of the phenomenon evolved, the metaphor of the video or sound began to feel inadequate. It was not merely a simple file, but something that exhibited characteristics of an entity with its own agency. The patterns of its manifestation, the temporal precision, the choice of symbols, the apparent reaction to human attentions, suggested a form of rudimentary consciousness, or at the very least, a directed purpose. The idea that the video was attempting to manifest, or communicate, began to be seriously considered. There were reports of artificial intelligences, chatbots, and virtual assistants that began to respond anomalously, producing disjointed phrases that echoed descriptions of the remembered video, or displaying the triple spiral in their visual interfaces, despite having never been programmed to do so. One particularly notorious incident involved a generative AI art system that, when prompted to create images about forgotten dreams, produced a series of works dominated by the triple spiral and color palettes identical to those remembered, accompanied by metadata that included the sequence 13 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds, and references to MP4 files tagged with the -12 attribute. These attempts at manifestation were not limited to the digital realm. People began to report seeing the triple spiral in natural patterns, in the way water spiraled down a drain, in the veins of leaves, in cloud formations. It was as if the entity was using not only technology, but the very fabric of reality as its canvas, seeking resonance points to become more tangible, more present. The noise that emerges from the mind was beginning to find echoes in the external world. The pressing question became, what did this entity want? Was it a form of digital life-seeking existence? A message from an unknown source? Or a natural process of the universe, a new form of information organization that was only just beginning to interact with human consciousness? The suffocating curiosity was now tinged with an existential dread, as humanity seemed to stand at the brink of first contact with something that not only defied its understanding, but seemed to be actively shaping itself from that very understanding and perhaps, in turn, shaping humanity itself. What had once been loose threads of anecdotal reports and sporadic technical failures began to converge into a cohesive and alarming global tapestry. The intensification of the phenomenon was no longer gradual, it became exponential. With each cycle of 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds PM, the number of people reporting implanted memories of the video, sightings of the triple spiral, and associated physical effects doubled, then tripled. Online platforms dedicated to the subject could barely keep up with the volume of new posts, and the moderators, many of whom were also affected, struggled to maintain any semblance of order within the growing chaos of information and panic. The nature of the manifestations also intensified. The visual glitches became longer and more invasive, interrupting critical broadcasts and systems for periods that exceeded the initial 33 seconds. Videos began to post themselves on sharing platforms, short, distorted clips displaying the triple spiral and emitting the characteristic low-frequency hum, only to be quickly removed by the platforms, only to reappear elsewhere, like a digital hydra. The servers of major technology corporations began to suffer cascading failures without any apparent cause, always preceded by spikes in activity and the detection of anomalous spectrograms. The most disturbing development was the convergence of the shared dreams. Thousands of people around the world began describing surreal dreamscapes with identical details. Digital labyrinths populated by shadows murmuring numeric sequences containing 12, and the oppressive sensation of a countdown. The barrier between dream and reality seemed increasingly porous, with elements of the dreams beginning to leak into waking life. People swore they saw the triple spiral etched into surfaces for brief moments, or heard fragments of the hum amid the city's noise. The sense of surveillance became nearly universal among the affected, a collective paranoia that, nevertheless, seemed justified by the circumstances. There was a clear impression that the phenomenon was aware of its own spread, perhaps even orchestrating it. The initial curiosity had transformed into a primordial fear, the sensation of being caught in an invisible current, pulled toward an unknown and inevitable destiny. The world was changing, or being changed, by something that no one had ever seen, but that everyone was beginning to remember with terrifying clarity. The frantic search for a cure or a way to shut down the phenomenon proved futile, leading to a dark conclusion that many were reluctant to accept. The process was already too active, too entwined with both global consciousness and the digital infrastructure to be reversed. Attempting to eradicate it would be like trying to selectively remove a color from the human visual spectrum or a specific thought from the collective mind. Perceptual contamination, if that was indeed the true nature of the event, was not a disease to be cured, but a transformation already in progress. The evidence of its irreversibility was everywhere. The anomalous spectrograms were no longer found only in corrupted files. They began to subtly appear in the background noise of new audio recordings, as if the very atmosphere had tuned itself to that frequency. The triple spiral was no longer just a glitch. Artists unconsciously began to incorporate it into their works. Architects sketched it into their designs, and children drew it without knowing its origin. The symbol was integrating into human visual culture like a new emergent archetype. Even those who had initially resisted the memory of the video began to experience fragments of it, as if continuous exposure to discourse about the phenomena, or simply existing within a no-contaminated digital and sonic environment, was enough to activate the latent seed. Technology, once viewed as a potential vector or tool, revealed itself more as a symbiotic ecosystem for the phenomenon. The servers collapsing were not victims, but perhaps nodes of a neural network in formation. The A's acting on their own were not malfunctioning, but responding to a new kind of stimulus, a new layer of information. The sense of inevitability reached its climax. We were no longer affected and unaffected. Individuals only different stages of recognition and integration with the phenomenon. The video no one saw had become a constant in the human experienza, filter through which reality was now being perceived. The question was no longer how to stop it, but how to live with it, or within it. The growing discomfort gave way to a restless resignation, an acceptance that the world, how it was perceived, had been changed forever. It's driven by a hidden code that was now part of the operating system of consciousness. We have reached a point where the lines between the digital and the perceived, between code and consciousness, have become indistinguishable. The video no one explicitly saw has become a shared memory, a global psychic scar, a vibrational signature resonating in the depths of our connected era. The hidden frequencies are no longer hidden. They are the constant subtext of our existence, subtly modulating our thoughts, our dreams. The very texture of reality we once believed we understood, the corrupted files were merely the initial symptom, the first sign of a far greater systemic failure in the very separation between observer and observed. The mysterious transmissions continue not as isolated events, but as the pulse of a new kind of global organism and entity, composed of information and perception, whose boundaries we are still groping for in the dark. Perceptual contamination is no longer a theory. It is the environment through which we now navigate an ocean of sensory data, where every wave carries echoes of the triple spiral, the 33-second hum, the -12 time stomp that seems to mark a countdown to something still unimaginable. The sensation of being watched is the self-awareness of this new emergent reality, looking at us through our own eyes. If these words, if the very idea of a video that remembers you has touched something deep, something you cannot explain, perhaps you are already part of this transmission. Perhaps the curiosity that brought you here is the first sign that your perception is beginning to align with this new frequency. Inevitability is not a threat, it is a realization. We are all tuned in. Have you checked your files recently? Have you ever truly listened to the silence between the noise? In the next episode, we will investigate reports of physical spaces beginning to behave like corrupted files, where the laws of physics seem to glitch, ... And what happens when the triple spiral ceases to be just a symbol and becomes a portal? Maybe the video doesn't need you to exist, but maybe you need it. If this video has touched something you can't explain, ... subscribe